and welcome back to Divine Ethereal Beings podcast with psychic mediums Dayna and Dayna. And we're excited to be back. This is so much fun. So, welcome. Thank you for joining. I do just want to speak into one thing real fast before we start. I just want to let y'all know that we don't know what we're talking about when we get on these podcasts. Like, we are not prepping in advance. We are not given information, and literally we hop on the call, and just now we were on for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes and just kind of waiting for things to drop in and for us to get the guidance. So we are ready. So yeah, if you want to take us into it, Dayna.
Yeah, and she's very right. You guys, like, we really don't come in here prepped at all. Like, this was something we were extremely guided to just do, and our teams were just like, you're just going to sit there and we're just going to give you what you need in that moment. So what came up today, though, was about more of the topic of learning how to surrender. And we don't mean that in a connotation of a bad way. We understand that sometimes there might be some trigger feelings, I guess, towards that word sometimes. And that's hopefully what we're going to try to give a different perspective on, is understanding more of what surrendering is into our own processes and our own journeys in a way. And the reason I feel this sort of came up today too was we're going to talk a little bit about dreams and how this really affects us sometimes in our dreams. We both had some experiences, and some other people around us have some experiences lately in dreams, and the surrendering process into journey and the emotional side of that as well. Because right now, where the earth is in the universe, we have come into a space that we're hitting energies that are hitting the earth that are amplifying everything to a very high state of, here it is. It's like you're thinking about something and all of a sudden someone else is bringing it up, right? It's that amplification. It doesn't always have to be bad, but we don't like the words bad or good. I know neither of us really do, but at the same point in time, that's what it can feel like sometimes in those situations. So we want to really talk about that a little bit more, because this amplification is likely going to be here for a good portion of 2024. And so I just kind of felt it was important to start talking about how to navigate that, navigate the emotions, and then of course navigate learning how to surrender to the process, and learning how not to make more pain and suffering for self, because resistance is always going to be a big chunk of that. And a lot of us are not really being given a choice about moving through certain things anymore. It's like the universe is like, here, it's time to deal with them now, and we don't really care what your reaction is going to be. So yeah, that's kind of our topic for today. And I've got a lot coming in, so I'm going to let you just kind of take over for a minute now, because I need to get some things sorted here.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. What I had while you were speaking, I just want to touch on the fact that there is a realization from, yeah, there's a lot coming in.
There is in this one, yes.
There's a realization from the other side that not everybody has the tools we have to navigate this. And so just please understand that that's part of why we're doing this, and part of why we're showing up, and that we are happy to help. There are lots of people out there that you can find willing to help. And so yeah, just know that you're not alone, and we understand, or we, not Dayna and I, they're saying we, the other side, we understand it can be scary at times, and that's why there are so many people like Dayna and I out here doing this to assist you. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because this one I feel like we're a little choppy on, and we apologize for this. And when we say we as well, like between Dayna and I, when we're usually saying we, it's usually coming now as we're channeling more of this information. So we're talking about ourselves and spirit source, whatever you want to call them. We all have our own guidance system, and so in which those are who we are communicating with. So when we are saying we as talking, that's often what we are meaning. And right away, my guides are instantly also bringing in the factor, like, let's talk about surrender for a minute here, because surrender can be seen as like this giving up or losing all control, or this connotation of like, it's a bad thing to surrender because now you're not winning the battle. It's like all these things that our human selves are kind of trained in our own societies to really feel like that. And that's how that word means. But surrender is actually, and we all know words are all energy, but surrender is a type of energy that you can tap into for self, and meaning more so when we choose to surrender self to higher self, source, God, whatever you want to call it, or no label at all. You just want to surrender to energy. The word changes a bit there, because surrender is a type of energetic state of being, and it doesn't mean you're losing. It doesn't mean the war, that you've lost or anything like that. What you're gaining is the factor of clarity and an unconditional love vibration that can create things to be a lot easier here through our processes and our emotions, because a lot of clarity comes from choosing to surrender into the process or the feeling, instead of trying to fight it all the time with your swords and the battle armor. So the word surrender for us means something quite different than what I would have typically grown up knowing what surrendering meant. If someone would have told me to surrender even 3 years ago, I probably would have fought you to death. Right? Like, I would have been like, no, not in a million years. I'm not giving up, like, I've got to do this. I'm not going to surrender. And then when I had my own awakening happen, it was like this connotation of surrender had such a different vibration behind it as a word compared to what the vibration actually is. And I started to understand that surrender didn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah, it's more like surrendering to your higher self, surrendering to your highest path, surrendering to self at all, right? As you are your own guru. And yes, there are guides, but really, yeah, if you can shift into surrendering to self, surrendering to higher self, right? Surrendering to the universe, like you said. It's in no way, shape, or form a surrender to circumstances or people or control structures in this world. It's not a surrendering into the 3D world that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. And like, so many of you are probably asking, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, none of us usually do until we start to understand and have the experience. And the really neat part about it is, first, the number one thing is you have to be okay and wanting true change in self, or your outside external forces or your own reality. True change doesn't happen without some type of change within self to make that external change happen. And surrender is a big step of that, because you have emotions that are likely bottled up in all of us that we would rather keep the cork screwed on hella hard than even, crack that bad boy open even a hair to feel any of it. And the piece about the feeling and emotion is simply there because it's not meant to be held on to. So even surrendering into yourself also means surrendering to your emotions and allowing yourself to feel what you need to feel, so in which then you can choose to make a different reality happen, because now you've released these things and these emotions that have been sitting in self that were kind of blocking you from ever creating something different. And with the amplification, this is going to become more intense, right? Like, people are feeling things and they're like, it came out of nowhere. Like, I was just sitting there, next, the tears are in my eyes, right? And I just felt immense grief or sadness, or maybe it's appreciation and gratefulness, right? And if you're not a crier, like I was never a crier before, I would have been angry because now I've got tears in my eyes, right? And so there's a lot that goes with it. But when I figured out the surrender piece, I thought, oh, it's all okay. It's just because it didn't want to be held in me anymore. If I don't hold
Yeah.
it, I gotta let go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and remembering that emotion is energy in motion,
Exactly.
right? And we're constantly moving and flowing, right? We are energy. And so if we're holding on to that, right, we're bottling that up, that's the suffering, right? Like you talk about. And that's like the pressure cooker, right? You can look at it like you are a pressure cooker and you're holding all this emotion, it's gonna blow. And so with this amplification or intensifying of energy, it's really important that you let this flow. And so years ago, I was shown this visualization for this exact thing. Because again, it can be a lot, it can be scary at first. So they showed me as if I have like a water faucet over my head, and I am in control of that faucet handle, of how much water or emotion energy is coming through it, right? And so they told me, like, if you want to move through this faster, open the faucet fully, right? If you want to decrease your suffering, open the faucet fully, let all of it flow at once. And what I found, and I was in this major phase of grief at this period of time, or again, I didn't know why, there was no apparent reason. But I just visualized reaching up there over my head and opening that faucet fully. And I just was flooded with grief. it was instant, but literally within a minute or two, it was gone. And I immediately shifted into, you know, equilibrium and centered and feeling quite blissful actually, and grateful, just because I was willing to open that faucet, feel it fully, and let it go and trust and surrender, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like you got to be willing to do it. Otherwise, it's like how I always joke with people. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people say they always want to go skydiving, but they say it, but they never really take the action to go and do it, because that terrifying fear of like, I don't know if I really want to do that. It's something very similar in all of us, even in life and in when it comes to certain aspects of self and the things that we don't want to feel. Like we get it. We understand you don't want to feel everything. And that's coming from me and spirit. And like us being human, we've all had our own experiences with having to feel. But the most beautiful part to me as well is just how you described it, is like when you actually choose to just open up the faucets and surrender to that emotion, it goes through so much faster than people even realize is possible. You do not need a lifetime worth of another lifetime to get rid of the lifetime of shit that's already happened. Right? Like it happens so much faster than people realize. It's just choosing that surrender and choosing that vibration of saying, okay, I don't want to hold on to this anymore. I really do want to let this go so I can get to a better place in feeling even. You know, we're not going to say your entire life might change in that moment, but it also may feel like it does to a certain extent inside self. Your external reality might not change as fast because it takes a little bit of time to start putting things in motion there, but it starts from here. And as soon as you feel different, well, guess what? Everything around you is going to change.
Yeah, and it's, you know, this is that process of transmutation, right? Like your body is the technology. Your ability to feel is the technology. So
100%.
like surrendering into the technology of your body, right?
You know what is so funny? They just put this analogy in my head. They're like, yeah, it's like, you know, when you have to go get a new computer or your new phone and you just know you have to do it because the other one's kind of like on its way out and you have no choice anymore. And yet it's kind of really frustrating to try and sit down and know learn this new technology, especially if it's not something similar. It's something very similar to our bodies, right? When we choose to surrender into that different way of being and understanding self, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes or annoying because now you're starting to see or understand things that you didn't before. But it resolves itself quite quickly because when you figure out that technology is very useful, it makes things quite easy after that, and a lot more in flow because now you know how to use it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that analogy. Because we can also utilize that, like our brain as like a search engine, right? And the questions matter, and all of that piece, which we'll go into in another episode. But I want to bring it back around to surrender. Where are they taking you now?
It's funny because it's like now I feel we've gotten the details kind of worked out about like how we feel and see surrender as a vibration. And as soon as you said it again, it was a washover of bliss. It's a washover that happens when you said it to me this time, because now I kind of feel like a kid in a candy store where I can just really have fun in my life, you know, and know I'm going to be taken care of in a way that when things or actions need to be taken, it's going to be shown to me. I'm going to understand. As long as I continue to surrender into the things I need to, I know life gets easier from here. And that's exactly, I think, really what the I don't want to say end goal because there's never an end goal. This is definitely a journey. It's still stuff we'd have to do, you know, on a fairly regular basis. It becomes like a habit, I guess, is more of where it goes. It's like, you know, we all get up every morning and, you know, you have your quick little morning routines or whatever that might be. That's what it kind of turns into, is it turns into this piece that just becomes part of life. And the gratefulness and the appreciation often come with that as well. And those I've always said, so they follow the vibration of surrender, because when you're in surrender, it just becomes so much easier also to be in that grateful and appreciation vibration to then start attracting different things into your life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I have so much coming in, but it's also going out so fast, right? Because this is what it's like when you're in the state of being. And that's what it is. It's not a habit, it's a habit, but it's your new state of being, right?
Yeah, it creates that new place. I think they say habit at first because it is a bit of a process to break away some of that old programming. But your body loves it so much. It's just like that new technology. You finally put the update in your phone and everything's working better. That's kind of like what surrender feels like in the body. So it is something that you'll naturally just start to gravitate towards. And then it does become a new way of being, because now you're not thinking about being or practicing that anymore. It just happens. So I
Yeah.
totally agree with you on that.
Well, and like you said, the surrender leads to gratitude and appreciation, and all of these are leading into the more expansive emotions, higher octaves of emotions, leading towards love, authenticity, joy, all of these things that as humans, this is what we want to experience, right? And this is where most people want to get to, right? Like that's how they want to be living their life. And we're moving individually and collectively to these places. And so this is why the amplification and the intensification, right? This is why this is so important. This is a piece of how we get where we're going individually, collectively, and but it all starts with that surrender piece.
Yeah, for sure. It's like they're like joking and they're like, yeah, remember, it comes from, if you haven't been on your journey for very long, start with self-awareness. And then self-awareness will lead you into that surrender piece, because they kind of go hand in hand. That's like if you want to build the base of a building, the cement comes first for, that foundation. And that's where surrender and self-awareness really come in. And boy, I wish somebody would have told me that, many years ago, that this was the starting point. There's a lot of information out there. And again, we're going to tell you in every episode, we usually say it at some point, take what resonates and leave what doesn't, because what resonates for you is your truth. And what doesn't is not necessarily true for you at that moment. And that's fine. And we're all going to be different. And that's like putting 5 people in the same room in different angles. They're all going to give you a different description of what they see or what they feel or what's going on for them in that moment. Right. So the surrender piece, even to those situations, though, I think is where I feel like I'm being led to is a little bit more now. It's not just even about self anymore, but even in situations where, we don't have control over other people and other circumstances that can happen. So they're also wanting to speak about the surrender to those situations and not feeling like, one, you have to fix everything just because you're seeing something different. 2, that it's your problem to fix in the first place. But 3, just also understanding that you're there for some kind of reason, whether that feels good or bad in that moment. It's something is there for your experience or to be learned from, but also don't think too hard about any of that either. And the reason why I say the surrender piece is hard to do for a lot of people in those situations, because we all want to figure out, well, I can help that person or I can make this better for everybody. And yet sometimes you'll try and either it makes it worse or nothing happens at all. And then people become frustrated by that too, because they're like, well, why? I tried to contribute. I did my thing, right? Whereas really, you may be just being asked to just surrender to that situation of whatever's going on and just allow it to all be. And just accept everything for what it is, and knowing that you can't change or you're not meant to change anything just because you're there. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's a really hard one lately for many.
Yeah, and I like this because that's kind of where I was thinking too. If we could share some personal experiences around what surrender has looked like for us, that could be helpful
For
for
sure.
people to really anchor this in and kind of integrate it and embody it in their own experience. So I have a great deal of experience with this. I don't know if you're feeling called to share anything specific or you want me to just start sharing.
Well, you go ahead. Mine, I think, is probably more to do with my direct family, is definitely what they're bringing up for me, but you go ahead and share yours first.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just asking what part of my experience they want me to share. What keeps coming in for me, and we've kind of, you and I have talked about this, the whole corporate structure, and that. I mean, really the bottom line is, right? We wake up, we find ourselves in these, what we perceive as these toxic experiences. And I think that's like a big place where a lot of people are right now. And so that could look like anything, right? Like that could look like your living situation. That could look like a relationship. Remembering everything is relationship. This could look like a job or a corporate structure. It could look like kid relationship, neighbor relationship, like you name it. like that's the money relationship, right? Like could look like any of these pieces. So, you know, in this process of surrender, as a single mom who took a leap out of a very not aligned marriage, in a city with no family support, no community, no structure, newly awakened, newly experiencing gifts, without guides, connection in the physical. So everything at that point was very kind of scary for me, right? And I was pushing my way through in a very human way. Through that experience, and just being in the flow of trust and surrender, quite frankly, I didn't have a choice. And that's kind of what we're talking about, where everybody is right currently with this amplification of energy. Like people don't have a choice. So I opted in 8 to 10 years ago to be walking this path ahead of time. And so, yeah, I found myself eventually, through many jobs and being let go of at jobs. I kept being targeted, right? Like, you know, I was not a vibrational frequency and resonance to be in these situations or positions yet. They were also supporting me, and I was learning so much, and they were mirroring so much. Like my work, my self work, my internal work was happening in these job environments because I didn't have other places and environments for it to be occurring as much. So you know, it was several situations of being very authentic and in my own integrity in these job places, and that being not aligned and making other people uncomfortable. And so then kind of being the classic being targeted, for lack of a better term, to be the scapegoat, be released, whatever. Sometimes that was by choice, sometimes that was not by choice. And then stumbling into an accidental corporate career. So I say that because I was very guided to be there, and my guides very much helped me to be in that place. And another part of my journey started there. And so again, this being into surrender and understanding that even when you're in these positions, if you can surrender into being there and again, observing, right? Like, why am I here and what's here for me? You can also empower yourself. So it's like I started out, came in entry level and started seeing these dynamics and what was going on. And it was like, okay, I want a promotion to the next position within a year. And if I don't get that, then I'm going to leave. And I took the inspired action, and I applied and I applied and I applied and I applied and I applied, and I being turned down. It was a year to the dot that I got the next position. And I realized, oh my gosh, my words are powerful. So then I started playing with that. Like, okay, I want to be in the next position. I'm ready for that next promotion. And I don't want to take a year to get there. 6 months later, I had that next promotion and that next role. And yes, I had taken inspired action. I had applied, right? And then a lot was happening. Like if you're in corporate, you know how it goes. A lot happens. There's a lot of things that I was continually surrendering to and navigating and all of this stuff, to the point of recently, again, spirit released me and was like, okay, it's time to move on. And I really got to, I've practiced being in surrender, being in flow so much that this time, as I went through that experience, and Dayna knows because she was part of this time period in my life that some of this recent stuff was going on, I was able to walk through it with so much more grace this time, without like so much fear. And yeah, okay, I had a lot of ego work to do in this process, but still, like, just being in that surrender and shifting your perspective to where I was no longer a victim through these circumstances. I was able to empower myself to continue to surrender, to continue to work with my guides, and also watch my external world change around me, right? Because as I was working with spirit through this, my life became more and more abundant. Right. So yeah, that's kind of all they want me to say about that. I don't know if you have
No,
comments or
it makes
more.
sense. Absolutely. Mine is definitely probably to do more with my direct family. When I went through my process and you want to call it your awakening, you want to call it stepping out of the matrix, whatever your term is, I started to see the world very differently, right? And we all do. We're starting to be given perspectives that, start to make sense for self about our own truths. And the more I started to surrender that process and going through my own process, my situation with my family got really hard because I just really wanted them to be able to experience what I was experiencing. I want everybody to be able to experience the freedom that can come with, this process. And so for me, I got very angst in a way and frustrated, and even parts of me got a little bit angry because I didn't feel like I could have certain conversations with my family now. I didn't feel like they were going to see things the way I really wanted them to see them because it made more sense, right? It made life easier. And so for me, I really had to surrender into the process of knowing everybody's on their own journey. And no matter what I do, it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to fix or help every single person I run into. And that was really tough for me at first because when you get to that point, or if you've already hit that point for self now, you know what it feels like to have that type of freedom and this flow and like this way less pain and suffering. And now things are just moving easier. And it's just this beautiful way of being. And it gets to be so hard sometimes when you're constantly, or you have family or friends around you that are not there yet. And that's all you want for them is to experience that. So for me, my surrender process with situations and other people, I really had to get humble. I really had to come down to myself and say, look, it's not my place here to fix or help everybody. Or the other piece that was really strongly given to me once too was with a situation in my family, and I was getting rather frustrated, I guess is probably the best word for it. Because again, I just wanted to be able to help, and I couldn't help exactly in that moment. I couldn't give them, what was going to make this all better, if you want to say it that way. And my guides came in and they said, remember, people will not hear your words unless they're in a state of being to actually hear them. You can talk all you wish, but people are only going to be able to take what they are ready to take, or where they sit on the scale, if you want to call it that, to be able to hear the words being said. It's just like people have to see an ad 10 to 12 times nowadays before they actually register it, right? Or click or interact with it, right? So it's something very similar even with people's words and how we are. So that surrender process for me really came with people in my family and other people that I knew that were not on the same level at that point, and just being okay with allowing them to just be on their journey with wherever they are. And you know what, if that also gets too hard for you, it's okay to also walk away and just continue to send them love from a distance. There's a whole big another piece of that that'll probably be in a whole nother episode about, boundaries and protecting your own energy and like how we can still help others from a distance. And that doesn't need to be the finalized, end all be all, but there's definitely some lines there that sometimes have to be drawn. If it gets to be this point where you're consistently finding yourself frustrated by it, maybe just giving yourself some space from those people or those situations is best off as well. But that's also, choosing to surrender, because you're not wanting to stand there and fight any longer with whatever may be coming through and in that feeling. So that was probably the biggest thing I learned, was definitely through those situations, was where I struggled the most. I wasn't really working so much like in an actual job per se in an office anymore by that point for myself, by the time, my own awakening was happening. And so that was still an easier situation because I could just pretend my computer wasn't working, or whatever it was that I was doing because I was working virtual at the time, or just pretend I didn't get a message and just not answer somebody. So it was, yeah, please don't do that. I mean, granted, I'm not telling everybody to just ignore things in work, but for myself, when I knew it was something that I just needed to step away from, that's kind of how I did it for myself in those moments. But again, like I said, I wasn't in my own job for very long, right? I left my job when I started my own business. So my story with the business piece was definitely to go to Dayna, because that was not this Dayna's experience necessarily when it came to the surrender piece in work. But it's different for all of us too. And remember that it's okay. Like, all of our stories we're just telling our stories so people understand, like, there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen, and it's just whatever you resonate with, that's great. And if it doesn't apply to you, that's also fine. So the
Yeah.
piece,
And
so sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'm gonna listen for a minute here because
I definitely had and continue to have, like, for me, family is a continual place of practice of these things we're talking about, of being in surrender, of being in this. And I feel like for me personally, when I learn these processes at like I get to have the opportunity as I go to apply it in every area of my life, right? So, and I get to continue to have this opportunity to be in mastery of all these various levels and layers of whether we're talking about boundaries or walking away or surrender. And then, like, I know a lot of people right now, especially a lot of women, are working on owning their voice, right? And healing the silencing that's been going on for so long. And not just women, but in general, that is a large group of the population that is in this experience. And it's like, you can do all, it is possible to be doing all the things at once. So, like, you can be authentic and speaking your truth with the understanding that you're planting seeds without attachment for these other people. And so we're not saying silence yourself when you're in these situations of surrender, whether it's with family or job or relationship. You can be true to self, you can be authentic, you can speak your truth, and learning to do so without attachment. And I think that that's an again understanding of, we're all planting seeds for each other, right? We're all walking each other home, and we're all being the example by how we're being of what that is to do that. And so, you also can choose, like, we're entering a time, I would say I had a choice of kind of compartmentalizing, like, I'm working on this thing in this period of my life, and I'm working on this thing in this period of, I had some of that ability. But with this amplification, with the intensification and where we're at now, like, you can't really do that.
It's making
It's
it
gonna be
hard.
all at once. You're not given a choice anymore. So it's really important to surrender and trust.
Well, the surrender builds the trust too, right? Like if so many people are like, oh, well, just trust what's happening, trust what's happening. And that's really hard for a lot of us to just trust what's happening, especially if it doesn't feel good, So that's where I do tell many that I do in readings and everything, depending on what's going on in their life. A lot of the time, spirit will always give it to me to say, we need you to surrender first before the trust will ever be built. I understand the human brain likes proof. We all do, right? We all want the proof, like give it to me in the scientific, place. But that is, they're going to leave us here. They're telling us our time is coming up. So we're going to leave the couple things that I've been given just in this moment with: trust is built from surrender, but from surrender and trust also comes a beautiful type of faith and hope that exists and creates in the human collective together hope and faith that there is something so much better that can be built here. And I understand with where the world's at right now, it doesn't feel great. It looks like there's a lot of terrible things happening, but remembering too that structures have to fall apart for something better to be built. But that also have to start with us individually before we're able to build collectively as a human race again. So go inwards, go do your work for yourself first, and you will create a space for not just you, but for others around you to start doing the same.
Yeah, and one last thing with that is, everything we're talking about is relevant and applicable to your human experience in this world, tangible physical world, and relevant in the multidimensional quantum space as well.
For sure. Absolutely. So with that, we're going to leave this one for where it's at on surrender, and we will of course be making more videos. We are building out our community, so we're going to start having hopefully some details out about all of that soon. And we're really happy you joined us here, and looking forward to hopefully having you with us on the next episode.
Bye.